Hi, welcome to the Mum Boss Method podcast. I'm Chrissy, but you know that already. And I've got a special guest with me today, Jen. Happy Wednesday, Jen. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So, Jen and I connected not very long ago, a couple of weeks ago, had a little chat about what she could bring to my audience and to the podcast. And I know that everything that Jen's going to talk about today is going to be super helpful, is going to resonate with a lot of you. It certainly resonates with me. I had a situation last night. I was like, oh, thank goodness I'm speaking to Jen tomorrow. This is going to help. So I'm going to stop talking. Jen, tell everyone who you are, what you do, and then I think we're going to go into a bit of what your story is, how you got there. Over to you, my love.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jen Wilson. I'm a wellness coach, and I specifically help women to overcome stress and exhaustion so they can be more present, enjoy life, and have fun again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stress, that word stress.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And overwhelm. Tell us then how you got to doing what you do now, because in our chat, we realized we had quite similar stories, didn't we? So
We did, yeah.
tell us your story.
Yeah, so it came about really from my personal journey, and it is a really long story, but I'm going to give you the shorter version today because there's quite a lot to it. But basically how it started, I was signed off long-term with stress, anxiety and depression, which was brought on by the job that I was doing. I was off initially for a few weeks because I thought, well, it's the job, and if I don't go and face it, nothing's going to get any better or nothing's going to change. I can do this. So I went back to work and I couldn't do it. I think I lasted maybe a few more weeks, and then I was signed off really long term because I just really did kind of hit the wall. So I was off for quite a long time, tried lots of different counselling, therapies, all the things that they recommend that you do. Spent a really long time wanting somebody to make it all better. I used to say, can someone just like flick a magic switch and just make this all go away? And I went on like that for a while, really. I really was at rock bottom. It was a struggle. I think my days, I would be able to get up, brush my teeth, get dressed, and take the dogs for like a little walk. And that used to fill my day because that's how bad my burnout was. I just had absolutely like nothing left to give. So I was off, and I don't really know how it happened, but I just thought one day, there's only like really me that can make this better. And although I kind of realized that, I still had absolutely no idea what I needed to do to get out of the mess that I was in. And the first thing I did do was I decided to have a complete career change because I thought I need to get out of the place that I'm in. So I was in like an office-based role. I retrained to be a personal trainer, having absolutely no idea what I was going to do when I'd done that. But cut a long story short, I did eventually land a job in a health and rehabilitation gym. So I was working with people with lots of chronic conditions, heart disease, lung disease, cancer, strokes, all the different things that people are referred to by their GP. And having seen, I should have said, I retrained as a PT because exercise was one of the things that got me through a really bad time. I still religiously tried to go to a class twice a week, not when I was signed off, but running up to that, before that happened, I still went to this class twice a week, and it helped really significantly. So that was why I went down the PT route. So I got this new job. Everything was wonderful. It was really relaxed. There was no stress. It was really quite straightforward. I did lots of extra training when I was there. But all I can say was, in hindsight, something still wasn't right. And I liken it to everything was just really, really close to the surface. So although I had this lovely stress-free job, the slightest little thing would just absolutely tip me over the edge, like mentally, emotionally. And I carried on like that for years because I didn't really know what to do, so I just carried on. And then coming back off maternity leave, I had a baby, came back off maternity leave, I decided I would start my own business, working with mums and babies, because one of the things I did when I was off, I was always outdoors because, like we just said, having dogs, you've got to get out whatever, haven't you? It doesn't matter if you haven't slept all night, you've got to take them out. And I just used to feel the benefit so much. And I used to think, where are all these like other mums? Like they could be out getting the benefit. So I started my business, my fitness business in postnatal exercise mainly. And then I specialised in women's pelvic health, because the more that I worked with these women, the more I realised they needed more specialist help. And I did that, but I still hadn't dealt with the stress from quite a lot of years ago. So I'd floated on for years, up and down, and then decided to start a business with a small baby. We were also renovating a house. We also we weren't able to live at the house for a while. It was just really a lot of stress, all adding up together. And in November 2019, I knew that I was heading for a second burnout. And I knew that if I worked for somebody else, I would have gone to the doctor and asked to be signed off work. But when you work for yourself, you can't do that, can you? So I thought, you've got this, Jen, just get on with it, So I plodded on, and it got to 2020 when the COVID lockdown happened and I had to start running my classes. And I actually looked at my husband and I said, thank goodness somebody has given me permission to stop. And just that admittance of stopping, I just hit the wall. And I think it took me 5 months to come round. And by this point, my son was 4. And when I did come round, I was just like, what? And when I mean come round, if people don't know what that means, when you kind of just shut down, it's like you're just getting through the days. You can't think straight. Nothing makes sense. It's just messy would be a good way to describe it. So when I kind of got through that and I could think a little bit clearer, I just thought, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? My 4-year-old son, like, this is significantly like impacting my relationship with him, because as I looked back, I had a wonderful maternity leave, but when that lovely bubble's over and life's back and the dropping off and the picking up and going to work and all the other stuff, I was just really stressed and emotional and not myself a lot of the time. And I was just like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? So at that point, I just said to myself, I am never, ever, ever, ever going to allow that to happen again. So I put in place all the things that people had told me for years I should do, but I dismissed because I think, one, I was so wound up and restless. I couldn't settle my mind to try anything. I remember trying to go to yoga and I was like, oh, get me out of here, just that.
Counting down the time until the class finishes.
Yeah, come on. And, you're so wound up, you can't sit still. It's a horrible feeling. It was, so, people said to do all these other different things and you're like, yeah, whatever. But there comes a point where you have to do those things, because I used to call it the burnout roller coaster. Like, you're up and you're down and it takes a long time to get out of the down, and then you climb back up and then you crash. And that's what it was like for me for years. So I made lots of changes. Like, I put loads of boundaries in place. My boundaries between work and personal life, being self-employed, were terrible. Personal boundaries, lots more self-care, really changed my view on what I was doing with my business. And I felt better. Things were okay. I felt in a much better place than I did. But then it didn't really last very long. There was still this niggle. I find it really hard to put into words. There was just something wasn't right, and I couldn't settle my mind. My mind used to race 100 miles an hour all day, every day. It was like, should I continue with my business? Should I wrap it up and get a job? What should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? I was very, very unsettled, and I just didn't know if I was coming or going. I didn't know what to do. And I thought, I've done all the things I can do on my own. I need some more help. So I reached out to a coach, and I started working with her in the January of 2021. I still remember the day I met her. I met her in December for a walk. She lives local to me. And I just remember that because it was really emotional. That when you ask for help and it all just comes out. So I started working with her in January, and within 6 weeks, I had a lot of sessions booked with her, but I think I'd only had 3 sessions with her. Sat with a lot of very uncomfortable things, because you have to. Stopping was one of them, slowing down. That was when she said to me, you need to relax more, I think I laughed in her face, literally. It's like, that's not happening, no way. But I purposely that January didn't over promote for my business, because I thought I'm just going to tick over with what I've got and give myself that breathing space, because I need to address this, you know. So I sat with a lot of uncomfortable stuff. And anyway, about 6 weeks in, and this, I'm not making the story up, I was sat one night with my dog. I was just sitting on the sofa, and it was literally like this ping in my head. I just went, oh, I know what I could do. And my dog's like, yeah, what? She's like looking at me. And I was like, I could train to be a coach, and I could support other women so like they don't suffer alone for all those years like I did, because that stress sat with me for over a decade. That's like a really big chunk of your life, to not be being yourself and living in the moment and enjoying life, isn't it? That's a really long time. So I started to Google it, because I thought, well, is there such a thing as wellness coaches or coaches that, and there was. So I was like, oh. And then I talked myself out of it, because I thought, well, that's ridiculous. 6 weeks ago, I could barely think straight. How could I possibly be in a position to say, I'm going to train to be a coach and help all these other women? But it didn't go away. The thought just didn't leave me. And the more I researched it, the more I was like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And I did. And not only did I do it, I took the plunge and wrapped up my fitness business. I told everyone I was finishing. And I wrapped that up in the March of April last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent the rest of the year focusing on training to become a certified wellness coach.
Mm-hmm.
And now that training, which was really interesting, because all the elements of wellness, which I didn't know existed, I'd kind of in my own private way muddled through them over the years. And then they all came together. I was like, wow, well, I did that. And it just made so much sense. It was just so meant to be. I can't put it into words, really. It was uncanny, really. So yeah, and the missing piece of my wellness puzzle, I'll just say all those things I tried, when I said I still felt really unsettled, was mindset. Because what that coach did with me was a lot of mindset work, and that was utterly transformational. It was literally like that last jigsaw piece, slotting into place. So yeah, that's how I'm here now, supporting other women, because I'm just so passionate that I don't want other women to suffer for all those years like I did. Because one, I didn't know what stress was. I didn't know what the signs and symptoms were. I didn't know what the implications were going to be long-term, physically, mentally, emotionally. And then when I did realize all this was happening, I had no idea what to do.
Yeah.
I figured it out, but it took me a really long time.
Yeah. Now
I don't want other people to take that long.
No, that's really interesting. I've actually got a couple of questions, if that's okay. So the women that you help now, are you helping them because they've realized they're at the point of burnout, or are most of them getting to you before that stage, or is it both? Like how does a woman recognize she needs your help?
So in an ideal world, I would love to help everybody before they got to that stage. But don't we just know that people generally ask for help when it's kind of got really bad? Yeah. So I would say, and the thing with this word stress, it's a bit like having a cold, isn't it? You can have a really mild cold and a really bad cold that puts you into bed for a few days. Stress is thrown around because stress is the natural response that we need in situations. But when stress is chronic, it means so much more. But I know what I found, all these symptoms, it was one, then another, then another, then another, then another, then until it was just this massive, they kind of all built up, so you dismiss them. So I think probably a lot of women get a lot of symptoms but dismiss them, but then before they know it, all these symptoms have piled on top of one another, and that's when that feeling of burnout comes. So really, I think if they're feeling like they're overwhelmed, like unable to cope, like everything's just kind of getting too much, people can feel really irritable and wound up and anxious. That racing thoughts is another one, because you get in this mindset of, you've got so much to do and racing thoughts. And then the flip side of that, then you have this negative talk to yourself because you don't feel like you're coping. And then that's another way that stress can really spiral. You know, they might feel like they've lost enjoyment in things, that they're just lost enjoyment in life. Like it's just a bit robotic, a bit going through the motions, that things just aren't like much fun anymore.
Yeah.
And you know, there's physical things as well. You can feel tense, you can get muscular aches and pains. I mean, I had a headache every single day for over 2 years. Why didn't I question that? Because I kept thinking, oh, I won't have it tomorrow. I won't have it tomorrow. But I did. And I now know in hindsight that was my body saying, because that's what happens, isn't it? Your body gives you one sign and you ignore that. Says, well, I'll just give you something else. Digestive things like digestive problems are signs of stress as well, like suddenly getting stomach pains, constipation, diarrhea, not digesting your food, and that real feeling of like being unable to concentrate, and like you can't make decisions and you can't remember things. And a really big one is that you don't feel present because your mind's just always elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because you've got so much to do. And that's a really, really big one for me, because that turning point with my son, like, you're not present. And unfortunately for me, as he's got older, he knows it, and he quizzes me about what he said. So I didn't say that. Like, oh. And not so much now, because I am much more present now, but there came a point when he was like sort of 5 upwards, he started sort of, you know, testing me.
Yeah.
So it can be different for lots of women, but I definitely think that if that generally that feeling of being unable to cope, and I don't think women like to admit that, because we like to think that we can do it all.
Yeah.
And we don't like to ask for help, because then we look like we're weak or we're failing at life, because we should be able to do it all, shouldn't we?
Yeah. It's really interesting because you know, one of the things that I talk to my clients about, and you've alluded to this as well, you know, life will never be free of stress. Unfortunately, that's not life. You know, there are always going to be situations where we feel a bit stressed and a bit under pressure and overwhelmed, and there's a lot to do. And that's why I said, you know, last night I was like, oh, thank goodness I'm talking to Jen tomorrow. I'm going to have this calming presence on the other side of the screen. But I noticed yesterday, and this is why I think yours and my backgrounds, and then, you know, the slightly alternative ways that we've then taken our experience and we now help women. But yesterday I had a call with my business coach, and we created like quite a challenging plan for me, and there's some real like challenging things in there. But yesterday I had, you know, I took my son to a hospital appointment, and then he was home for the afternoon, and I felt that pressure of having a lot to do. And then he's nearly 13, and he had a little bit of an attitude thing going on yesterday as well, and so there was a little bit of that to deal with, and I could feel it inside me just getting a bit and I sat back and I thought, you know what, 6 years ago that would have escalated, and I just would have lost it yesterday. But I've learned how to recognize triggers. But also I don't have, you know, 6 years ago I was at the breaking point of stress and anxiety, and, you know, had been signed off and all of that stuff. So I was able to take myself out of the situation and just stop and think and do the things that work for me. The other thing that I think really resonates with me is this being present. And one of the things I really recognized in myself before was that for the first 8 years, and this is really hard to admit, I don't think I was as present as I could have been in Charlie's life. And this morning he came into my office while I was just doing a little bit of work just before he left for school, and he sat down and he said, I'm anxious and I'm nervous, and these are the things that are going through my head. And I was able to put down everything I was doing, turn to him and spend 15 minutes with him talking about what was going on for him in his head. Whereas, 6 years ago, I wouldn't have done that. I would have said, well, we'll talk about it later. I'm busy right now, I'm working.
And I've been there. I used to get, I wanted to get to bed. I've got work to do. It wasn't that lovely wind down and the snuggle and the story and enjoying. It was, it feels bad, doesn't it? Admitting that for those years you weren't present or the mum that you would like to have been. But
yeah, and
we're aware of that now. So
exactly. So one of the things that we said we would talk about is, I'm really super interested in what your practices are personally for you, but I'd love for people to listen to this podcast and take away some real practical things that they can start thinking about and actioning. And one of the things we talked about was that awareness, which I guess is what I've just described. Is my awareness is so much greater now of where my stresses and challenges are. But yeah, I guess I don't know whether you want to start with you or start with the awareness piece. It's really up to you, but I'd love for you to be able to share kind of your non-negotiables, but also how my audience can start to create that for themselves.
Yeah. So for me, my non-negotiables are journaling, which I used to turn my nose apart. Meditation, which I say, yeah, what a load of rubbish, I'm not doing that. This is years ago, I would say this. For me, journaling it's the most powerful thing I do. It just gets everything out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
I do it first thing in the morning. I get up and I start with 2 prompts of what am I thinking, how am I feeling? And sometimes I'll do it through the day. If I'm having a bit of a wobble or something's getting to me, I'll go and do it at different times. It's not a set rule that I only do it in the morning. I will do it other times. I mean, the other day I went to my mum's and we were going out and I said, can you just excuse me for 5 minutes? Because something was really bugging me and it was on my mind and I knew it was going to spoil my day. And I went upstairs and I just grabbed a piece of paper and I just got it all out on my head, folded it up, popped it in my bag, and I went and enjoyed my day. So it's just really powerful. And the beauty about journaling is there's no rules, there's no right or wrong. You don't have to, prompts are helpful to get you going, but you don't have to stick to a prompt. You can write what the heck you want, just get it out of your head. Yeah. And it helps you, sometimes helps you reason as well, when you're kind of throwing things about in your head, just seeing it on paper, it's a bit like having a conversation with someone. You just get it out and it's like, oh, I see that now. So journaling's one. Meditation is another. I never thought I'd be able to meditate, sit still for a minute and my mind racing so badly, but now I absolutely crave it and I can get really lost in a meditation. So those are my 2 morning things that I do.
Can I just ask on those 2, because it's really interesting. I put this on my Instagram stories this morning that I had meditated, and I put a poll on to see how many other people meditate, and I have had so many responses back from people saying, I'd love to be able to meditate, I just can't sit still. And my standard response to everyone so far, and I haven't answered everyone yet, has been, that's a story you're telling yourself.
Yeah,
that's just a story. Just start with a minute.
I started with a minute. 2. I tend to do each morning no more than 10.
Yeah.
I sometimes treat myself to longer if I've got time, but very, very, very rarely do I do longer than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I could never sit still. I never thought I'd meditate because it's that mind as well, because you can't switch your mind off, but that's the whole point of it. You're aware that your mind's going somewhere, so you bring it back, and that's part of meditation. People think that you're not allowed to think about things. Yeah. So I'm not doing it because I can't not think about things, but that's meditating, because you're aware of bringing your thoughts back to what you're doing. And you do believe me, my mind used to race at 100 miles an hour all day every day, and now I can meditate for 10 minutes. Yes. It's amazing, and the benefits that it's given me, I can't even put it into words. And I even do one before I go and pick my son up if I've really been engrossed in something with work wise. I've got one I really like for an afternoon, and it just resets me. So that when I
Mm.
meet at school, I'm not like, I didn't get that finished and I'm in the middle of that. I'm like at this, I'm reset, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
So it is powerful stuff.
it is.
Yoga's my other one. And again, that's 10 minutes. Sometimes I do more, but most mornings it's 10 minutes. And that's more because it just more for my body, you know, keeping my body moving and removing the tension and just generally feeling good. And my other non-negotiable is getting outdoors. That just will never not happen in my life. I mean, I've always loved the outdoors, but I find now that I have learned that I don't have to be working every single minute of every day, because when you're in the height of stress, you're like, I've got to do this, I've got to work, I've got to be, you know, I've got to. Now I get up, and if I'm struggling or it's not flowing or it's not working, I go out. And I can tell you that every time I go out, the thing I've been struggling with is back in my head by the time I've got back home.
Mm.
And I don't just use it for that. I just love being out in nature anyway, just the way it makes
Mm.
me feel. So they're my four non-negotiables.
Amazing. Actually, just with the journaling as well, that was what I got my son to do this morning. I'm a massive advocate of journaling, and I've just released a journal as well. But I just gave my son a little notebook this morning, and I said, let's write it down. Let's write down what's going on. And one of the things he'd said was, I'm tired. I'm really tired. And so I said, okay, you write down what you think might be the solutions to you not being so tired. And he said, I need to go to bed earlier, you know.
Yeah.
And he's 12 and a half, and he's figured that out himself by
That's amazing.
writing it down, rather than me saying, well, then you need to go to bed earlier. So he's more likely to do it now. But yeah.
And I'd just like to say that if people are listening thinking, oh, how on earth do you do all that in the morning, I get up a little bit earlier, because to me, the benefits that I get from doing those three things, which is at the maximum 25 to 30 minutes in the morning, which I don't think is huge, the benefit I get from doing those far outweighs getting out of bed a little bit earlier. Oh, my other non-negotiable is a cold shower as well. I know people won't want to do that, but I do have a cold shower every morning.
Nice.
That
Love
just makes you feel amazing. But I realise that's not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah, love them.
Yeah.
Great, love them. Not too dissimilar to mine. Okay, so let's talk about this awareness piece then.
Yeah. So what I would say just before that, because it kind of ties into awareness, is for anyone that's feeling stressed, if they've got symptoms of stress, they've been struggling for a long time, don't ignore it. Don't think it's going to go away, or don't think that moving on to the next thing is going to make it all better, because it isn't. And I'm speaking from experience of moving on to new jobs, moving on to new things, but it just follows you everywhere you go until you actually stop to do something to deal with it. It just stays in the body if you don't deal with it. So that's the first thing I'd like to say, and that ties into awareness really, because if you're aware of how you feel, of how you react to a certain situation, or how somebody makes you feel, how situations make you feel, if you're aware, you can do something about it. If you're not aware, nothing's ever going to change, because you're just going to carry on. And I know that when I was in really deep, I don't think awareness really came into it, because I was in so deep that I was too numb to what was going on around me. I just didn't feel anything about anything or anyone, to be honest. I was done. But as now that I've learned and I know, awareness is massive, because what you were saying before, those things that a while ago might have really set you off on a really bad don't. So for me, somebody actually said to me today, one of the clients I was working with, she was like, you still do all these things every day to manage your stress? I'm like, yeah, I do, because if I don't, I'll just be going right back where I was. And that's the thing with it. It isn't just this quick fix of, well, I'll just do that for a few weeks and everything will be all right. Because as you said, life is naturally stressful. There's always going to be something around the corner that throws a curveball at us that we have to cope with. But if you've been doing all those little things, which we're coming on to, you cope with that stress better, you recover quicker.
Yeah.
So awareness is massive, being aware of how you feel, what's affecting you. don't just bury it, don't ignore it, become aware. Use a journal to write down what things are making how you feel, and just get a picture, because sometimes we don't know what is causing us our stress.
No.
It can be an accumulation of many things, or it can be one thing specific. So awareness is huge. And then in terms of doing things to help us feel better, it's about taking small steps. And, you know, don't underestimate the power of taking small steps, because I witness the most like incredible transformations with women that take all these small steps. They do this one thing, which might sound like nothing, and they do it, and then they do it, and then it's habit. So then they don't really think about it anymore. And then they add the next thing on, and they have to get their head around that because they haven't done that yet. But then, oh, I'm doing that without thinking about it. And then they add the next thing on, and suddenly you've got all these small steps that build up into something really big. Because if you don't take small steps, then for someone who's already stressed and overwhelmed, you're just going to be overwhelmed, because what you want is the end result. And what's the thing I need to do to not be stressed and feel like I feel now? And that's just going to make you go like, and nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
But if you can take one small step at a time, it doesn't matter how small it is, just one little thing that you can change. Whether, I'm only using my examples, I'm not saying everybody should journal or meditate, but I can only go by what I've done. You know, maybe you journal every morning for a few minutes. And this leads me on to what I'm about to say is try it for 2 weeks, however long. Don't just do it for a few days. It needs to be at least a week or two, I would say, for something new you're trying. Try it, be willing to experiment, like note, is there any changes? Oh, well, that was a waste of time, that didn't work. But just because it didn't work, don't then throw the towel in and say, oh, you know, sod it, I'm not doing anything else. Just accept that, right, well, that didn't work for me, so now I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
Because I've tried many things that don't work. I think, well, that was an absolute waste of my time.
Yeah.
And you could just get so, I don't know what the word is, you could just get really fed up and think, well, what's the point? But you've got to be willing to try. You've got to be willing to experiment. You've got to be open that it might not work for you, and what your friend does that's wonderful, like I'm talking about journaling and meditation, other people might be like, well, that does absolutely nothing for me, and that's fine. There's no rule. You've just got to find what works for you, and the only way you do that is by trying and being open to it working or not working. And if it works, brilliant, add the next thing. If it doesn't work, just try something new. Simple as that.
I think we're so guilty, aren't we, of wanting immediate results for something. You know, oh, I've journaled today and I've meditated today, so I should feel better. But it's like, you know, it's like adding in the work that I do, which does incorporate those things as well. But it's like saying, right, okay, let's get five portions of fruit and veg every day. Doing it one day is not going to make a huge difference, but doing it for a month is going to make a huge difference.
Absolutely. It's about being consistent as well, isn't it? If you're going to pick something, and I think the mistake as well people make is they can do something, and I've done this, I feel I'm fixed, I feel great now, so I stopped doing all those things. I stopped journaling, I stopped meditating, and the other bits and bobs I was doing, I just like, so what happened? Within a matter of a few days, I was feeling a bit agitated, a bit irritable. My mind was a bit all over the place. I'm like, why am I feeling like this? Because I'm aware of how I feel and how I'm reacting, and I couldn't pinpoint what had happened to make me feel like that. And then I was like, oh, I know what it is. I haven't been journaling or meditating.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing to stop something you've started, because then you do realize it is working. But you've definitely got to be consistent in the first place.
Yeah.
And even with journaling, I was writing realms of A4 when I first started. But then I got to the point, I remember one day going to write, I had nothing. I was like, I've got nothing. And all I wrote was, I have nothing to say today. I didn't just think, I'm going to stop journaling forever because I'm clearly fixed. But, you know, my mind's obviously okay now. But that day, I felt euphoric. I was like, I've actually got nothing on my mind. How amazing is that?
That is amazing. And that leads into that point around consistent, not perfect. And that's why it ties it, you know, our two worlds tie in so beautifully together, because a lot of people will say to me, but I don't know how to journal. What if I do it wrong? There is no wrong. You know, use prompts, use, you know, and what I say is use prompts. And then if you need a bit more space, take up a bit more space somewhere else, you know, somewhere when you need a bit more. But it's about doing it and not being perfect, because this is you. There's no one checking. No one's going to be saying, have you meditated correctly today? have you journaled correctly today? It doesn't, you know, it's, consistency over perfection is so important.
I think so, because we can get too wrapped up in that. And I also think, like, an important message is consistency is important. But at the same time, if something didn't happen one day for whatever reason, don't beat yourself up about it. Just tomorrow's a new day. Just pick it up again. Because that just doesn't help anybody's mindset if we're then beating ourselves up for not doing the thing that's supposed to be helping us in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Brilliant. This has been such a good conversation, and I know that everyone is going to find this really helpful. But if they want to find you and find out more about you, where do you hang out the most?
Instagram mainly. Yeah. And then obviously
we love the gram.
Yeah. And there's my website as well, but mainly if people want to follow me, Instagram's the place.
Okay. I will make sure that all of your links are in the show notes. So if there's one piece of advice or nugget of gold that you want to let people take away and think about, let the ladies that are listening think about, what would it be?
I would say there's quite a few, but I'm trying to pick a really good one. I would say, please don't ignore how you're feeling. I know that sounds maybe a little bit lame. That's my son's favorite word at the moment, but it's huge, because don't ignore it. It doesn't mean that you're a failure or you're not coping or not doing all the amazing things that you're supposed to be doing without feeling stressed. You're a human being, and women these days, we have so many more demands placed on us. We're trying to be the perfect mum whilst having a full-time job. There is just so much more going on that there is no reason why any woman should feel like she's failing at life. So don't ignore it. Reach out, ask for help, even if you just look up what the symptoms are and actually acknowledge that you are stressed. Because for me, I didn't know. I just thought something was really wrong. I just thought I had some kind of illness. And I remember when I read a magazine article with all the symptoms in, I was like, well, I've got all of those. And I practically celebrated being stressed, because I thought, well, I'm not ill, I'm just stressed. And I parked it. So take my advice. It isn't just stress. Stress has huge implications on you long-term, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So don't ignore it. Just reach out and ask for help.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jen. It's been such a lovely conversation and really, really helpful. And everyone go and find Jen, because she's amazing.
Thank you. I really hope that does help some of the ladies out there.
It will. Okay. So I will be back next week, and thank you so much for listening. Please give Jen a follow. And if you're not following me, also come and follow me. Speak to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.